Hello, welcome back to the second session of the pen and wash course. Today we're going to be looking at seascapes with flowers in the foreground. Okay, so here are some samples of ones I've done earlier. All of these have been done sort of out in the landscape, sitting on the cliff tops, and here's some others. Quite a number of these. One of my favourite subjects, actually, sketching outside is just lovely. And we're going to be using a fine liner pen again, exactly like last time. Mine is water soluble, but if you only got a permanent one, you can still do this. And we're going to be using some watercolour paints. I'm going to be using cobalt blue and phthalo blue. I'm going to be using a little bit of burnt umber to get some sort of distant rocks, and I'm going to be using cadmium yellow and lemon yellow to get different shades of greens, and also maybe to do a little bit of splattering in the foreground to have some flowers. And I'm going to be looking at doing some thrift, which is just a lovely sort of this, more like this one here. So some sort of little thrift on the cliff tops. So I'm going to be using, for those flowers, I'm going to be using permanent rose. Now, I'm going to be working from a photograph today. These are a couple of photographs I took quite recently. Looking at the lovely billowy sort of thrift on the cliff tops, just beautiful. So I'm going to use that as inspiration. I'm also, I like some of the qualities on this photograph. This one's got some lovely sort of different grassy stems and sort of different flowers here in this little grassy verge. So I may combine some of those lovely shapes in here just to add a little bit more interest. If you're going to do something like a composite with several different images rather than just sort of sitting and looking at the landscape outside, it might be a good idea to do a couple of little sketches, rough ideas of how you may want it to sort of end up, just slightly different compositions really. Now I've done this one slight composite, so it's got billowy sort of bits of lovely flowers, and I might do a few more grassy stems and things coming up to add a bit more interest. Okay, so get yourself ready, and then we're going to do a little pen study first. Okay. Now, if you have got some land on the horizon, as I have here, that's an example of one done earlier, and you're using a water-soluble pen like I am, you're probably going to find it easier if we paint the sky area first, just so you don't risk this sort of running up into the sky and sort of spoiling your image. So what I've done, I've just drawn the horizon line lightly with pencil. I'm going to wet the sky area, get the sky done, get it dried off, then we can do the pen and wash. And I think that's actually a much safer way of doing it. So I'm just going to thoroughly wet all this area. I have got some land, but I'm just going to actually wash straight over the whole thing. I don't want to worry about that too much because it's only going to be a sort of fairly pale blue, so I can go over that and it won't notice. So just go up to your horizon line. Just try and make sure you don't. Just going to try and do that so that line's quite straight, and then thoroughly wet it. Okay, I've got a diluted cobalt blue that I'm going to be using for the sky, but phthalo blue would be just lovely as well. Make sure you dilute it though, so only get a very thin wash. You don't want it too dark. So I'm just going to come in, bring that in. Some light washes down here. And then what I may do is, she might go in with a tiny little bit of phthalo as well. That's looking a little bit dull. Tiny bit of phthalo as well. Just brighten it up a bit there. There we are. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift out some clouds with a tissue. So I come in and just very quickly with a clean tissue lift out some cloud areas. Get a clean bit of tissue. Carry on. I'm just going to come in and lift a few more. Just from up here. Tissue. be quite speedy with this because the paint dries fairly quickly. There, just breaks it up so you've got a suggestion, some clouds in there, makes it a bit more interesting. There we go. Okay, so got a clouds in the sky. I'm just going to dry that off quickly with a hairdryer, then we can go in and do some pen work. Okay, it's all dried off. I've actually made a start by putting some land on the distance on the horizon line, and I'm now going to, you can, if you want to, you could draw the horizon line with a pen, as I have done here, or you can leave that horizon line of the sea and actually just do that with paint, which I think I'm going to do this time. I'm now going to come in and just do some of the foreground detail. Okay, so looking at my image, I'm just going to come along and actually just start doing some sort of billowy shapes where the flowers are going to be. Just going to come along and just put some detail in there. I'm not going to put too much. A lot of this is going to be done afterwards. I'm going to put some washes of paint on here, and I'm going to work back into it as well. Just putting on a few little bits of detail, a few little grassy bits, but I'll say we can add to these afterwards actually as well, so which is probably easier. So just putting on roughly where this horizon line is going to be, and you need to decide whether you're going to put any rocks in the sea or not. I've got two different images here. Obviously this one's a bit closer. This one doesn't, you can't see the rocks. This one you can see some rocks on here, so I may just put a little suggestion of a little bit of rock just there, just to add a bit more interest there. And I think that is all I need to do with the pen now. I'm just going to get some clean water and we're just going to wet that pen area. Okay, make sure you've got a tissue handy to dab it if it goes a bit more than you want it to. So working on your horizon line, be a bit careful which side of the line you wet. So if you wet this side of the line and let it run downwards, you don't want to let it run upwards into the sky. So I'm just touching it lightly, and I'm just going to bring that down. There we are, just wetting that tiny bit. And the same with this rock here, it's going to be in the sea, like that, just a little bit. I'm just wetting again here, and you can let some of that run down a little bit and puddle, which is quite nice. And I'll show you a bit closer to the camera in a minute. I'll just hold these down, letting that puddle and run a little bit, and I'm then going to dry this off again before I do the next stage. Right, so I'm just going to hold that a bit closer so you can see. So you can see that that's actually already given you some quite nice sort of tonal contrast, and it's given you the outline of where you want to go. I'm going to dry this off with a hairdryer now, and then we're going to come in and we're going to put some masking fluid in the sea to get some sparkle. Right. Okay, so this is all nice and dry now. I'm actually going to be using some masking fluid, which I've just put in a little lid, to create some sparkle on the sea, or you could use an oil pastel, which is absolutely fine. Now my image that I've got here that I'm working from hasn't got a huge amount of sparkle actually on this sea, on this particular image, but this one I really like the sparkle and the light on the sea on this one, so I'm actually going to cheat a little bit and actually use some of this as inspiration to where I'm going to put my my lovely sparkle on the sea. I'm going to be looking at that one to get the sparkle. So basically I'm going to be using a palette knife, which I find is much the easiest way of putting it on. The other thing you can use, which are very useful, are these. These are called colour applicators or colour shapers, and these are just like paintbrushes, but they've got like rubber tips on them, and you just basically use them as a drawing tool. You can dip them in the masking fluid and sort of apply it in different ways, which is really, they're very useful. Or you can keep a really old brush to use for the masking fluid. Little tip, if you are using a brush, dip it into some washing up liquid, rub the washing up liquid right into the base of the brush, and before you use it, and then you can wash the masking fluid out. Otherwise the masking fluids tend to sit particularly down in the base of the bristles, and it ends up all splaying, the brush splays out, and you can end up with just a big horrible mess really. So I'm going to be using the tip of my palette knife initially to do some little lines on the sea. So I'm actually just going to draw some little lines backwards and forwards just to get the sparkle on the sea. You could also do little dots, and obviously I can then flick it as well to get little tiny speckles, which I'll be doing in a minute. I'm going to put a little bit of masking fluid around the base of this rock, and I'm also going to put a little bit here. I've got a little bit of beach here, so I'm actually going to be putting another image, looking at the waves and actually trying to have suggestion of some white just here. I've got the waves sort of going in and out a little bit. Suggestion of something there. So I'm going to finish doing this, and I'm going to also do some splattering. So I'll just show you how to do that. So I'm just going to take this, and I'm just going to stand up to do this, and I'm going to ping, 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 and you get lots of little splatters of, which actually look really just work very well for getting a sparkle on the sea. So I do that. Now I'm going to get this dried off, and we are then ready to paint. Okay, so I have now dried off my masking fluid, and I'm gonna wet the sea area and lightly paint over here. I say lightly because you don't want to scrub at it and sort of risk it pinging off. Oh, actually, so one other thing, I did draw a little horizon line with pencil there. I'm just going to, before I put any paint on, just rub some of the pencil away so it's really faint, so I don't want it to show. That's it, just got rid of that, that's it. So I'm going to be using some phthalo blue, but very diluted phthalo blue for the sea. You could use cobalt or ultramarine would be fine, depending on what sort of colour you want the sea to be. But I'm going for a more sort of slightly turquoisey colour, which I just think would be more summery looking. So I come in and just do very, very light wash. Carefully painting around where you've got your rock area. So some colour there. That's it. Now I can start adding a bit more colour to that now. That's the first initial wash. So I'm going to, my sea obviously is running in this direction, so I need my paint to sort of run in that direction. So I'm going to put a little bit more paint on. But first of all, if you want it to be a bit more turquoisey, you can add very, very diluted, a little bit of lemon yellow, or yellow ochre actually, if you wanted to. And I'm just going to put a tiny bit here near the shoreline, just a tiny bit. I'm just going to put in, just start getting a bit more of a turquoisey, lighter sea, just in that little area. There, nice. And then I'm going to put some more paint on top. Make sure you get your horizon line straightish if you can. And now we're going to bring the paint in this direction. So I've made it difficult for myself because my sea's going in this direction, which is not quite so easy as if it's going straight that way. So I'm going to make sure the paper's nice and wet. Just realised that's it. Now, what I need to do is get the paint to run a little bit, just to trickle a little bit downwards. The plan, just so you start getting a different little bits of colour coming into the sea. That's better. Let it run in the direction, obviously, you need it to go. You can see you just get little different areas of colour come building up into the sea. Makes it a bit more natural looking. And I need a little bit more colour in there. It's a little bit pale. I quite like it pale though, actually. Right. Just going to add a tiniest touch of cobalt to the far distant, just to give that a slightly different darker colour on the horizon line. Let that run down this way as well. Getting a bit of a puddle here, so I get my tissue and just mop that up before it causes any damage. That's it. Just let the paint flow backwards and forwards a little bit. Just mopping that up there with the tissue. I just need a tiny bit more colour in that sea, I think. Just going to put a little bit of paint and let it run. There. Probably fine. Now I'm going to get that dried off before we do the next stage. Right, I've got this all dried off now, and now I can start thinking about painting the distant rocks, the beach, and then I tend to work forwards. I find that easier. It's up to you, because otherwise you're sort of leaning over and you can smudge it all. So what I'm going to do for the distant land, they're usually sort of a pale blue, grey or purpley colour, so I'm going to use a little bit of diluted cobalt blue, and I'm going to go over the whole thing with a little wash of cobalt blue. There we are. Just a suggestion of the land on the distant horizon. I may add, when this is dry, I'm going to add another little wash to this area with a little bit of brown, just to bring that one forward. Again, now I'm going to work and do the little bit of beach. I'm just going to be using a little tiny touch of diluted, very diluted yellow ochre for this area. Okay, just to give a suggestion of the beach there. Oh, actually, I think I may have got a bit of blue on my brush. It's gone a bit greeny. A bit more. That's better. Just a very pale wash. And you can always put a little tiny touch of that just in the foreground bit of sea there as well. Take some of that colour away. It's a little bit dark. There we are. Just a suggestion. Okay, and what I'm going to do while that is wet, I'm just going to get a little bit of the phthalo blue that I used in the sea, and just a tiny touch on this area here. Just gives you the look of a bit of wet sand there. Just a little bit there. Okay, that's that bit done. Now I'm going to start putting some colour in here. So I'm going to be using 2 blues and my lemon yellow to give me some lovely greens. So I'm actually going to daub on the yellow first, then add, because I'm going to let the colour pool and puddle a little bit, and then I'm going to dry it all off, and I'm going to put some more pen work on, and I'm going to do lots of splatters for the flowers. Right, and I'm just going to get a little bit of phthalo blue. That's it. I'm just going to start letting this pool and puddle a little bit, just so I've got some different shades of green going on. Now I'm just looking at my photo and looking at the areas where I've got shadow in my image, and just, this is cobalt blue now, I'm just going in and adding some slightly darker areas of colour. So I'm just going to go in and add a little bit more yellow to some areas, because actually on this picture you can see I've got some really very bright greens in the bright sunshine. So it's going to I'm just dropping on a little bit of water here, that's what I'm doing, just to let that merge and run a little bit. And I'm just going to allow those colours just to merge and mingle a little bit together. Let them to run around a little bit, just so it's slightly more patchy, and that's it. It's more the sort of feel I like to do. You don't have to do this. I just quite like letting the paint run and merge all on its own to give sort of, there we are. Now I need to get that dried off, and then I can come in and actually do some more pen work on there. Okay, so I've dried it off again, and that's done. I'm now going to put just a very diluted wash of burnt umber brown over this area of cliff top, just to make it look a little bit closer than the one behind. I want to be able to see the blue through, so I'm just putting that, there we are, just over there, and that sort of brings that area forward then. There. Okay, so that's just done that, and I'm just going to put a little tiny touch of brown on this rock here, a bit more. And I may also just put a tiny touch of the bright green mixed with lemon yellow and the phthalo blue, just a few little touches of bright green on there to suggest a little bit of seaweed. Now we're ready to do a bit more pen work actually in a moment, and then we can dry it off and take off all this masking fluid. So now I'm going to dry it off, take off the masking fluid, and then do a bit more pen work, and then we can do some lovely splatters for the flowers. Okay, all dried off, taken all the masking fluid off, and it looks much nicer now. We've got the sparkle on the sea, and now I'm just going to now come in and start reinforcing some of these, the detail of this. I'm putting some grassy sort of stems on, and these can also be little stalks for the flowers. I'm just coming around and doing a few little areas. And this is up to you. You don't have to wet this pen now. You can just leave it as it is, or you can wet it and let it run if you want to. It's entirely up to you how you prefer it to look. So I'm just looking at my image and just reinforcing some of these areas. Now if you are doing grassy stems, try not to do them all too sort of the same size and too straight. Sort of want them going in different directions and different lengths, otherwise it looks a little bit too neat and tidy, a bit like a picket fence, which is not the sort of look you're going for really at this stage. So I'm actually just going to wet that a tiny bit, I think, just to let that soften it in, and then I'm going to start putting some splatters on. So I'm just going to soften those edges just slightly. That's better. Just so they're not quite so dark and harsh looking. Smudge them in a little bit. That's better. There we are. That's okay. Now I'm going to start doing some splatters. So I'm going to be using, because I'm looking at beautiful sea thrift, I'm obviously going to be using pinks. So I'm going to be using permanent rose for this one. It's easier to stand up to do this, so I'm going to get my palette knife again and do some splatters. Oh, one little thing, I must remember to cover up the areas I don't want splatters with a tissue. There we go. Put tissue over there, otherwise I'll have lovely pink splatters all in the sea, and that's not quite what I want. So taking my palette knife, I'm going to just do some splatters to get the feeling of flowers coming on now. So just doing this carefully because I don't want to go too mad. Now I'm just going to carry on and build this up with a few more splatters, and then I'll just come back and show you because it takes me a few minutes to do this. Okay, well I've cut lots of splatters on here now, and what I'm going to now do, I'm going to get some water on my palette knife, and I'm just going to flick in some areas, flick some water, and that will diffuse these and make them sort of merge a little bit more. Feels quite nice. Right, so some of this has run a little bit more than I want it to, so I'm just getting a little bit of tissue, and I'm just going to dab the areas that I think are running a bit too much. While it's wet, you can easily dab and take some of the paint away. Okay, so I'll take that tissue off. Oh dear, got a few splatters on the beach there, what I might need just to take those away a little bit. So I'm going to get this dried off again and then look at it, and if you want to, you can then add a few more grassy stems and things like that onto here. So I need to just get this quickly dried off, and then we can look at it and see if we need to do any more. Okay, so I've dried it all off, taken off the masking tape, which always makes it look better. I've just added a few little grassy stems in the foreground here just to finish it off, and that's all I've done. And I'll just hold that up so you can see. So I think it works quite well, having just the splatters and softening them a little bit with water. Just gives a slight impression of you've got lots of little flowers growing there on the cliff top, which works really well. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you have a go, either working from photographs or go out in the beautiful sunshine and look at some of the lovely flowers by the sea. If you do Facebook, and you have a go at this and you would like to share what you've done, please put it on our Facebook page, which will be coming up. And there will also be a slideshow of some other students' work that have done this technique with me in classes. Thank you ever so much. Next time we're going to be looking at dry stone walls using pen and wash. Thank you very much. Bye.